So let me just go ahead and read the summary of what's required. So the recommended settings for 1080p 60 frames per second with frame generation enabled at medium settings. Recommended options include an RTX 2070 Super, RTX 4060, or AMD Radeon 6700 XT. Now, I am not sure if that is for... Yeah, that is for the recommended settings, so that's... I cannot understand that. So, it requires using FSR and frame generation in order to get that type of situation here. So, yeah, that's for recommended under the medium graphics setting. That it will have 1080p 60 frames, but that's only with frame generation, which means input lag. And then, of course, you have, like I said, on top of that, the PS5, base PS5 version, at least at Tokyo Game Show, was only running at 30 frames per second with drops. And that, I guess, sorry, my brain's kind of all over the place right now. Let me try to see if I can explain this better. So the base PS5 version at Tokyo Game Show was running at 30 frames per second, no performance mode, with drops into the 20s. And even with that being the case, like, I understand people would say that there is certainly potential that in the next 5 months they could very easily fix that. And, like, in general, I would say, yeah, that makes sense. They have plenty of time to where they could fix it, they could optimize it. But, of course, then there's the reality that they already have the required specs and the recommended specs for the PC version published 5 months ahead of time, which sounds like they're not planning to fix it before launch. And if they're not fixing it on PC, what makes you think that they're going to fix it on PS5? So, anyway, your thoughts?
Oh boy, this is a complete disaster. This is a mess that Capcom has done here, and there's no reason why this game should not be or should require a high-end CPU just to get to 60 FPS without frame generation. I mean, I don't get it at all. I mean, you shouldn't have to buy something that's the equivalent of the latest Intel i9 or like the 3D version of Horizon CPU. Like, you shouldn't need that to get 60 FPS in a game without frame generation. This is horribly unoptimized. And something else that I also thought about is the fact that the PC version is also going to have de novo. So, you know, that's not doing any favors at all. So you're having a game that is unoptimized with DRM enabled as well. So, yeah, I mean, I can definitely see why it's going to require a lot. And, like, the fact is, you shouldn't have to brute force. You shouldn't have to use hardware to brute force the game to run right. The game should just be running well. And something that was even mentioned here, which makes sense to me, is the fact that because the PS5 Pro uses the same CPU, if it is a CPU problem, having a Pro is not going to fix that either. You would have to have a better CPU in the PS5 Pro in order for you to actually possibly get closer to 60 FPS, which means that everywhere you go, whether it's on console or PC, bad optimization is completely going to ruin the performance of this game, which is a real shame for people who love Monster Hunter, people who have looked forward to a new Monster Hunter game, people who enjoyed the recent entries and wanted to see what happens next. It's definitely a real shame, and I mean, I'm gonna have to. I'll definitely have to send this to one of my friends because I know that he really has been looking forward to Monster Hunter Wilds, and just like the fact that because I know he built a new PC probably sometime earlier this year, or late last year. But I definitely don't think he has or something that we've considered a high-end CPU. So that's definitely going to impact his performance in the game, and it's a real shame. I mean, personally, I wasn't going to get Wild because I'm just not in favor of what Capcom has been doing with switching out Denuvo for a possibly even shadier DRM. But after seeing this, it would definitely push me to would wait a long while before I got this game, and I would get heavily discounted and also after performance patches were made, because this is not excusable. Whether it's for the PC or the console, getting 30 FPS without using frame generation, that there's no excuse for that. And even if you could say, oh, it's a next-gen game, yeah, well, I mean, we've had other games that have come out in more recent times that have looked just as good, possibly even better, and still hit 60 FPS without needing frame generation. So this is inexcusable. And it's not like this is a small little indie team either. This is a major AAA company. So definitely no excuse there.
Yeah, and I think one of the worst things about this is that Capcom usually does such a great job on optimizing their games, but it seems like they've started this trend, starting with Dragon's Dogma, where they're releasing a game essentially unfinished because it's unoptimized on console and on PC. And this one is especially concerning because of the fact that it's extremely rare that you get system requirements for a game 5 months before it comes out. The fact that we're getting system requirements already for this game, and that they're saying that you have to have frame generation. I mean, my guess is it's probably largely because of Denuvo. It's probably going to be that Denuvo is specifically the reason that they require frame generation. Denuvo's hurting the performance so badly that they have to have frame generation. But even without that, you look at Monster Hunter Rise. That game runs beautifully. On the Steam Deck, you can get 60 frames per second, no problem whatsoever. And a consistent 60 frames per second. I think you can actually pretty much get a locked 60 frames per second. But you cannot do that. But the fact that, this game is not going to do that. And yes, I know Monster Hunter Rise was originally a Switch game, but it's still like a great looking game. Even though I didn't play a lot of it, everything I played, it was fantastic, And I know that Wilds is taking more of the worlds aspect. I think that they're kind of like going in between, are taking the best of Monster Hunter World and mixing it with the best of Monster Hunter Rise to make Wilds. And okay, that's great, but if it performs like garbage, that's really going to hurt the experience for people. These games should run at 60. They should be optimized specifically to run at 60 because it's better that way. It's always better. It is not a game. If you're stuck at 30 on consoles, especially on the weaker consoles, okay. Even base PS5, I don't believe there's any reason why it shouldn't be running at 60, or at the very least have a 40 frame per second mode, something like that. I don't even think that's really acceptable for this kind of game and for console that's supposed to be so powerful and everything else. And then the PS5 Pro, hopefully they'll at least have a 60 frames per second mode for that. But if they have 60 frames per second on there, my wonder is it going to be just running at a low resolution and upscaled? It probably would be anyway. It won't be actual 4K regardless. But is it going to be they're just using PSSR and running the game at 500p in order to get 60 frames per second? Or are they just not even going to bother with it? They're just going to leave it in its unfinished, low frame rate state and then maybe patch it down the line. because it's like, yeah, they want to get it out before the end of the fiscal year, and Monster Hunter is always a really big seller, but this is something that does concern me. Now, I'm not someone who's planning to buy Monster Hunter Wilds. As it stands, like, I loved Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. I was obsessed with that game. That is probably the second or third most played game I've ever played in terms of hours. I mean, the first being Destiny 2. I think it's like Destiny 2 and Destiny 1, which I kind of really just count together because it's basically a continuation of... Destiny 2 is essentially a continuation of Destiny 1, so I kind of just count those together. So let's say collectively all of Destiny is my most played period. After that is probably Persona 4 Golden, only because I played through it several times in order to get the platinum, because I screwed up too many times to get it done in 2 runs like I should have been able to do. And then after that is Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, which I have like 200 some odd hours in, but I could probably boot it up right now while we're talking. Just because I never fully finished 3, I didn't get as much into subsequent entries, even though I really liked what I played of 4 Ultimate, and I liked what I played of Rise, and a little bit that I played of whichever was on Switch first.
Generations Ultimate?
Generations Ultimate, yeah. Though I didn't play very much of that because I just felt like I couldn't invest in it. But the thing about Monster Hunter is, like, I think that those games are fantastic, but the reality is that because of the fact that I have yet to finish it, and I technically have like 5 Monster Hunter games, I am not really... I don't have any intention to buy Wilds. But because of the fact that this is something where you're seeing this terrible performance issues, or these potential terrible performance issues, especially when you look at the system requirements for PC already being up and requiring frame generation for 60 frames per second, which it shouldn't be there, it just makes me think Capcom's going to release this game in a completely unfinished state, and they're going to be just giving people this game that's not done. I mean, I guess that's the same thing as saying it's unfinished, but point being... Alright, so let's see here. Okay, so I have 240 hours and 47 minutes. And that is without having completely finished the game. You know, I was talking with some people on the Married to the Games Discord about this, because, you know, I saw this thing about it potentially having bad performance on the PS5, the base version, because of what the person said who tried it out at Tokyo Game Show. A lot of people are like, oh, don't Chicken Little this, you know, it's like, the sky isn't falling, and they have plenty of time to fix it. And it's like, I wasn't even trying to, like, rag on the PS5, I was just saying, hey guys, I just thought you might want to know this. There's the potential that this could be an issue, and, I mean, like, I wouldn't necessarily think that it's, oh, this is the final state, if not for what we're seeing with the PC requirements. It's just something that worries me. Not like I'm losing sleep over it, obviously. I mean, it's not that important. But it worries me that we're seeing this more and more. Companies using frame generation, requiring upscaling, and FSR of all things. FSR is garbage. The upscaling from FSR is just absolutely terrible. The frame generation is okay if you're playing on a reasonably powerful PC, because then you're not getting as much input lag. It's like, it's not nearly as noticeable. But like when I've tried using frame generation on the Steam Deck, the lag is noticeable. It's like, oh, I'm getting a few extra frames, but it's also significantly more input delay. It's like, it makes it feel like there is 0 input delay on Dark Souls in comparison. And actually, I mean, Dark Souls really isn't that bad. It's just the way it's designed is different. But anyway, I don't like this, and I hope that Capcom will actually do something to fix this. Honestly, I especially hope it for console players, because they shouldn't have to suffer just because this company's being lazy. PC gamers especially shouldn't have to, because basically right now the way it's looking is that they're not going to do jack with the PC version. They're just going to give us the most broken version, the least optimized, with DRM on top of it, and then they are going to say, screw you guys. And I'm sure that probably what's going to end up happening, they'll release it in this broken state where it has to have FSR and frame generation, or any sort of upscaling and frame generation. And with Denuvo attached, someone's going to break off Denuvo. Performance is gonna increase by like 50% or greater, and then modders are gonna fix the game. That's what I'm expecting. And then they'll get in trouble. They'll get, their accounts banned or whatever. I don't know. Maybe I'm being overly dramatic on this. I probably am, but I don't like companies doing this because it tells me that AAA gaming is dying or dead, and I know a lot of people already think it's dead anyway. But I mean, then there's like examples of great ports of games. Like almost all of the recent PlayStation ports for PC have been fantastic. Even the ones that were PS5 based have been really good ports. But then you have Capcom just taking the easy way out. And granted, this is the first time that they are simultaneously launching on PC and consoles. But it's obvious that they are rushing this out at this point. And I have a feeling that probably they release the specs required for PC early just so that they wouldn't have to deal with it. They're just like, okay, we're just going to release these specs. This is what we have. You're just going to have to deal with it. We're going to focus on the console versions, and hopefully they'll at least do optimized ones for the consoles, because I'd much rather see the consoles at least get something good out of it, because PCs, sometimes you can brute force at least, but you shouldn't have to. FSR and frame generation should never be required. It should be completely optional if people want to do it. It's one thing when people have weaker hardware, they want to try to get a little bit more out of it, try to get above the 30 frames per second, which is what you're expected to get on the minimum requirements. But it's a whole different story when it's saying you have to do this for medium settings in order to get 60 frames per second and 1080p. That's just not acceptable. Alright, I'm done.
Yeah, nothing else for me. You definitely hit it on the head.